we're rocking and rolling on page 6. Let's get started. Write the equation of the line in slope-intercept form that passes through the point -4, -9, and has a slope of 1/2. Okay, so go back to the question. Write the equation of the line in slope-intercept form. This is our ask. They want us to give them y equals mx plus b as an answer. However, in y equals mx plus b, you need to have the slope filled in and the y-intercept. Let's see what they gave us. That passes through the point -4, -9, so that's one piece of information. This is an x and a y value, and has a slope of 1/2. Okay, so we have one piece of information. All right, we have the slope. Now, there's many ways to get to y equals mx plus b when you're given a point and a slope. The method that I'm going to take you through is I'm going to take you through plugging it into something called point slope form and then converting it into slope intercept. So let's talk about what point slope form is. Point slope form. So point slope form looks like this. It's a regular y value minus a specific point, y1, equals m times x minus x1. In point slope form, you need a point and the slope. And that's what they gave you. They gave you a point and a slope. So we're going to use the point slope form to convert it into slope intercept. Now, when you're using point slope form, you're going to plug in for the point, which is y1 and x1, and you're going to plug in for the slope, which is m. You are not going to plug in for the y in the front, this one right here, and you're not going to plug in for the x, the first x in the parentheses. So let's see what that would look like. So I'm going to have y minus. Now let's take a look at what my y1 value is. Looking at my point, this is x1, this is y1. So y minus -9. Okay, remember, we're always careful with those formulas that involve a negative. So we're doing y minus a -9y value equals our slope of 1/2, parentheses, x minus your x1 value of -4. All right, so we have two places we have a double negative. Those are going to become positive. So it's y plus 9 equals 1/2 times x plus 4. All right, now this would be the final answer if they asked you for the line in point slope form. Now, to get it into slope intercept, we're going to do some manipulation. We're going to try to get the y value all by itself. We're going to distribute into the parentheses, and we're going to get it into y equals form. So let's get started. First thing that we're going to do, I'm going to unhighlight this, is we're going to take that 1/2 and we're going to distribute it to the x and to the 4. So this is going to become y plus 9 equals 1/2 times x is 1/2 x, and then 1/2 times 4, half of 4 is 2, so plus 2. And now one step further, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get the y all by itself by subtracting the 9. So minus 9 on both sides. This cancels. So now we have, bringing it over here, we have y equals, y all by itself, 1/2 x, and then positive 2 minus 9 gives me minus 7, -7. This is your line in slope intercept form, where it's y all by itself. So again, to recap, if they give you a point and a slope, there's many ways to go about finding slope-intercept form, finding y equals mx plus b. What I took you through is I had you start with point-slope form, which is this right here. I had you plug in for y1, x1, and the slope m, and then I had you convert into your final answer, your y equals. Okay, let's go on to the next problem. 41. What is the slope of the line x equals -5? X equals -5. Recall what we talked about earlier. Hoi, Vux. That always helps you with horizontal and vertical lines. Hoi Vux says that your horizontal lines have a 0 slope and they're y equals lines. So you would see y equals some number as the equation for that line. This is x equals some number. So let's see what Vux says. Vux says if you have a vertical line, that means your slope is undefined, and it's an x equals some number. So for example, x equals -5 would be the equation of a vertical line passing through the x-axis at -5. So the answer here is, what's the slope? Our slope is undefined because we have a vertical line. So if it was a graph with an x and y axis, and I have -5 here, it would be a vertical line that passes through -5 along the x-axis. Okay, let's move on to the next problem. Number 42. Which lines have a y-intercept of 5? Check all that apply. A y-intercept of 5. Well, look at all these lines. Some of them are in slope-intercept form, but the rest look like they're in standard form. The easiest way to tell what the y-intercept is of a line is if your equation is in y equals mx plus b format, in slope-intercept form. If it's in y equals mx b format, where it's just y equals all the rest of the stuff, it's really easy to tell what the what the y-intercept is. It's this b value. It's whatever is being added or subtracted at the end. So let's take a look at our first one. So for the first one, we have y equals 5x minus 1. This is in y equals form. It's in slope-intercept form. So this thing at the end, the -1, that is your y-intercept. We want a y-intercept of 5. So the first one is not correct. This is not aligned with the y-intercept of 5. Let's take a look at the next one. 4x minus 8y equals -40. That is not in y equals form. So we're going to start doing some work here where we're converting things into y equals form. So 4x minus 8y equals -40. So we're going to start by subtracting 4x from both sides. -8y equals -4x minus 40. Now we're going to divide everything by -8. And we get y equals, the two negatives cancel, 4 over 8. You can simplify that if you divide top and bottom by 4. You'll simplify that to 1/2 x. -40 divided by -8, again, you get a positive. 40 divided by 8 is 5. So again, you notice this has a y-intercept of a positive 5. That is what I want, so I'm going to check it off. This does have a y-intercept of 5. Let's take a look at the next one. X minus y equals 5. This is not in y equals form, so let's get it in y equals form. X minus y equals 5. Start by subtracting x from both sides. So we have -y equals -x plus 5. Last step, you can't have a negative in front of the y. It just needs to be y equals without the negative. So we're going to divide every term by a negative 1. That's going to cancel out the negative in front of the y. So it's going to be y equals. The two negatives here are going to make it a positive. In other words, it's going to change the sign of the number. So it's going to be a positive x, and then positive 5 divided by a negative is going to give you a negative 5. So negative 5 is not the y-intercept that we want. We want a positive 5. So no, this last one that we thought maybe would be our answer right away because we see a 5 here is not correct. Because once we converted it into y equals form, we saw it was a negative 5 as a y-intercept, not a positive 5. Okay, we're on the second row. Let's take a look at x minus 3y equals 15. X minus 3y equals 15. Subtract x from both sides. Now we have negative 3y equals negative x plus 15. Now, we're going to divide everything by negative 3 in order to get y by itself. So now we have y equals negative x over negative 3. There's an invisible 1 in front of the x. So it's a negative 1 divided by a negative 3. The negatives cancel, and you just get 1/3 x. The positive and the negative becomes a negative. 15 over 3 gives you 5, so a negative 5. Again, we don't want a negative 5 y-intercept. We want a positive 5. So no to this one again. All right, let me clear off some room, and let's start to do the last two. Okay, we're back. So 2x minus y equals 10 needs to be converted. 2x minus y equals 10. We've done this so much, this should become second nature. Subtract 2x from both sides. Now we have negative y equals negative 2x plus 10. Get rid of the negative in front of the y. So basically divide out the negative. Cancels in front of the y equals. The two negatives here make a positive, so now it's 2x. And then positive 10 divided by a negative gives you a negative 10. So again, not what we want, no. All right, last one. 6x plus 4y equals 20. So we're going to start by subtracting 6x. Now we have 4y equals negative 6x plus 20. Lastly, we're going to divide out that 4. So now we have y equals negative 6 divided by 4. I'm going to simplify that before I even write it down. I can divide top and bottom by 2. That's the greatest common factor. So negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So negative 3 over 2x. And then positive 20 divided by 4 is positive 5. And that is what we want. It has a y-intercept of positive 5. So great. The last one is a line with a y-intercept of 5. So we have two choices here. The second one and the last one. Okay, let's keep it moving. Number 43. Which is the equation of the line that passes through the points negative 4, 8 and 1, 3 in slope-intercept form? So they want the equation of the line as your final answer. The form that they want it in is slope-intercept. So they want their final answer as y equals mx plus b. So in order to get there, we have to know the slope, and ideally we would have the y-intercept, but we're usually not ever going to get the y-intercept. The way that I went over the last problem, number 40, is the way that I'm going to go over this problem. I'm going to use point slope form, which looks like this: y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, and I'm going to convert it from point slope form into y-intercept. That's the method I'm going to use throughout this packet. All right, now I need to be able to plug in a point, an x1, y1, and a slope into my point slope form. Right now, all I have are points. I don't have the slope. So step 1, I need to solve for the slope by doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So step 1, let's go ahead. I'm going to call negative 4, 8 my x1, y1. 1, 3 is my x2, y2. Okay, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to do 3 minus, now I look at y1, and it's 8, over x2, which is 1, minus, now let's look at x1, which is negative 4. All right, go ahead and simplify. 3 minus 8, negative 5, over 1 minus a negative 4. The double negative makes a positive. 1 plus 4 is 5. So the slope here, negative 5 divided by a positive 5, is a negative 1. All right, so my slope is negative 1. The next thing that I need is a point that I can plug into my point slope form. So the next thing is I'm going to plug into here. Okay, so you're going to plug in. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So I'm plugging in everywhere I have a y1 and x1, and I'm plugging in for the slope that I just found in step 1. I have to choose what point I want to use. I'm going to use 1, 3. I could use either one, but I'm going to use 1, 3. Let's go ahead. So it's going to be y minus y1 is, let's see, I'm going to use 3 because I chose 0.13 equals, now my slope that I just found the last one is negative 1, parentheses x minus, and now x1 is 1. Remember, once I've gotten to step 2, I don't care about this point anymore. I've decided I'm going to use 1, 3. That's my choice. They looked like smaller numbers, so I wanted to use 1, 3. Let's go ahead. Now that we're here, this is point slope form. I'm going to convert this into slope intercept by distributing the slope and then solving. So y minus 3 equals, distribute the negative 1. Negative 1 times x is just a negative x. I'm not going to put the 1 anymore. Negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1. And now last step to get it into y equals form, which is the slope intercept form that they wanted, is to move that negative 3. So add 3 to both sides. Okay. So now we have y equals negative x plus 1 and 3, which is 4. So y equals negative x plus 4 is my final answer. I'm going to write down that my last step after step 2, step 3, was to solve for y. All right, let's move on to the next one. Number 44. which is the equation of the line that passes through the points -4, 3, and 2, -6 in slope-intercept form? This is the same question as the last one. What's the equation of the line? And they want it in slope-intercept form. Okay, so before I can get into y equals mx plus b form, remember that we're going to use point slope form, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So we're going to use this in order to figure out slope-intercept form. Now, step 1. So to find the slope, let's go ahead and use the slope formula. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to call -4, 3 my x1, y1, and 2, -6 is going to be my x2, y2. Okay. So plugging things in, y2 is -6 minus y1 is 3 over x2, which is 2, minus x1, which is -4. I always write the minus before I look at what the next point is. Equals -6 minus 3 is -9 over 2 minus -4. The double negative becomes a positive. So 2 plus 4 is 6. This can be simplified. The greatest common factor here is 3. So I'm going to divide the top and the bottom by 3. -9 divided by 3 is -3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So my slope is -3 over 2. Now, once I have my slope, I plug into my point slope form. So let's go ahead and plug in. Y minus, now I pick a point. Let's go ahead and pick the first point this time. Y minus 3 equals my slope of -3 over 2 times x minus x1, which is -4. The two negatives will make a positive. All right, let's go ahead and simplify. So now I have y minus 3 equals, I'm going to distribute the -3 over 2 to both terms. So for the first one, -3 over 2 times x is -3 over 2x. And then -3 over 2 times a positive 4. I'm going to go ahead and work that out on the side. So -3 over 2 times a positive 4, put it over 1, and then multiply across. -3 times 4 is -12. 2 times 1 is 2. -12 divided by 2 is -6. All right, so it's a -6. So I'm going to put minus 6. Last step, I'm going to move that -3 next to the y. So it's all by itself. Add 3 to both sides. So now we have y equals -3 over 2 x, -6 plus 3 is -3. So my final answer in slope-intercept form is y equals -3 over 2x minus 3. Let's recap the steps. Find the slope, plug it into point slope form, and then convert point slope form into y equals form. Those are your 3 steps. All right, let's move on to the last problem on this page. Okay, last problem, number 45. Seems a little intimidating because we have a situation here, but we're going to work through it. As the student government treasurer, you prepare the budget for your class rafting trip. Each large raft costs $10 to rent, and each smaller raft costs $40 to rent. You have $1,600 to spend. Write and solve a linear equation to find the number of smaller rafts you could rent if you rent 12 larger rafts. Now that's a lot. So let's go through and let's start annotating, marking things up. All right, first sentence. As the student government treasurer, you prepare the budget for your class rafting trip. Knock that out because that is unnecessary information in solving this problem. Each large raft costs $10 to rent. So it's $10 per large raft. That word each is important. So it means $10 per large raft. So you're going to multiply 10 times the number of rafts you plan on renting. So the way we're going to write that is we're going to write 10L. L stands for the larger raft. Okay, so I can put that on the side. L means the number of large rafts. Large rafts. Okay, so let's keep going. And each smaller raft, so each smaller raft costs $40 to rent. So $40 times the number of smaller rafts. So 40 S. S for smaller rafts. So S equals the number of small rafts. Or smaller, but I'm just going to write small. Small rafts. Okay, so 10L and 40S. You have $1,600 to spend. So together, you can spend up to $1,600. Now, this is not meant to be an inequality symbol. I just mean that together, all right, like an arrow, together, you can spend up to $1,600. Write and solve a linear equation. So the first thing is they want me to write a linear equation to find the number of smaller rafts. So then they want me to find the number of smaller rafts. They want me to say what S is equal to if you rent 12 large rafts. Okay, so now I know for a fact that I'm renting 12 large rafts. So in fact, L is going to equal to 12. All right, before I can plug in that large rafts equals 12, I'm going to set up some type of equation. Now, total amount of money I have is $1,600. For a large raft, it's $10. For a small raft, it's $40. But together, it's $1,600. To show that I'm adding the cost of each of these together, I'm going to use plus. So my equation is going to look like 10L, $10 times the number of large rafts, plus $40 times the number of small rafts is going to equal $1,600, which is how much I may spend. Now, this is my equation. So this is step one. I wrote and I saw, and now I'm going to solve the linear equation. So this is my equation. Now, in order to figure out the number of smaller rafts, in order to figure out how much S is equal to, I need to go ahead and I need to plug in the number of large rafts that I intend on renting. So, large rafts, L, they said is 12. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plug in 10 times 12 plus $40 per the number of small rafts equals $1,600. Now with only one variable, S, I can solve for S and figure out the number of smaller rafts. So 10 times 12 is 120 plus 40S equals 1,600. Now I'm going to subtract 120 from both sides. So I'm going to have 40S equals, let's go ahead and do the math for 1,600 minus 120. So 1,600 minus 120. 0 subtract from 0 is 0. 2 subtract from 0, borrow. 10 minus 2 is 8. 1 minus 5 is 4. So 1,480. And then the last step, I'm going to divide 1,480 by 40. So I can figure out what S is equal to. Okay, so let's go ahead and do some long division. The zeros are going to cancel out. So it's 148 divided by 4. 4 goes into 14 3 times. 3 times 4 is 12. Bring down the 2. Bring down the 8. 4 goes into 28 7 times. And 4 times 7 is 28, so there's no remainder. Okay, so that means that 37 is the number of smaller rafts I'm going to rent. So that's my final answer. I'm renting 12 large rafts and 37 small rafts, and the total cost is going to be $1,600. And the equation I used to come up with this answer is this right here. $10 per large raft plus $40 per small raft equals $1,600. And we are done with this page.